The most dangerous mistake a person with power can make is assuming the quiet person in front of them has none. The afternoon sun hung low over Highway 17, turning the wide Texas sky into a pale sheet of heat and light, while the asphalt shimmered like water beneath the tires of passing trucks. A small gas station sat just off the highway exit, the kind of place travelers stopped at without remembering its name later, for fuel pumps, a faded sign advertising coffee for 99 cents, and a gravel parking area where engines idled under the steady hum of cicadas. Most people there that afternoon were just passing through, a couple refueling a pickup truck, a delivery driver stretching his back beside a white van, and an elderly man wiping dust from his windshield with a paper towel. Then a black SUV rolled slowly into the lot and parked beside pump number 3. The vehicle looked clean and expensive, the kind that didn't usually stop in quiet roadside places like this. A woman stepped out from the driver's seat, calm and composed, wearing a dark jacket, blue jeans, and sunglasses that reflected the bright sky above her. Her name was Angela Carter, though no one at that gas station knew it yet. To them she looked like any traveler making a quick stop between cities, someone grabbing fuel, and maybe a coffee before getting back on the road. She moved with the steady confidence of someone who had spent years learning how to stay observant without drawing attention, her eyes scanning the pumps, the highway, the people around her. Inside the convenience store the air smelled like fresh coffee and motor oil, the low hum of a refrigerator blending with country music drifting from an old radio behind the counter. Angela paid for gas, picked up a small cup of black coffee, and stepped back outside into the heat. For a moment, everything seemed ordinary, just another quiet afternoon in a small Texas county where nothing important ever seemed to happen. But across the lot a patrol SUV had already turned into the station, its tires crunching lightly against the gravel as it rolled to a stop near the entrance. Sheriff Daniel Brooks stepped out slowly, adjusting the brim of his hat as he scanned the vehicles in the parking area with the casual authority of someone used to being the most powerful person in the room. Brooks had served as sheriff of Oak Ridge County for nearly 12 years, long enough that people in town rarely questioned him and visitors rarely challenged him. His eyes landed on the black SUV near pump number 3 and stayed there. Something about it had caught his attention, maybe the out-of-state license plate, maybe the way it stood out against the older trucks around it. Or maybe it was simply the woman standing beside it, quietly sipping coffee while the fuel pump clicked steadily beside her. Brooks walked toward the SUV with slow, deliberate steps, the gravel shifting beneath his boots. Angela noticed him approaching but didn't react, her expression calm as if she had already expected this moment. The sheriff stopped a few feet from the vehicle, studying the plate number again before looking directly at her. The people around the station began to notice the tension forming in the air, conversations fading as curiosity replaced routine. Brooks rested one hand on his belt and spoke in a voice loud enough for the nearby pumps to hear. "Ma'am," he said, his tone firm but edged with suspicion. "This SUV was reported stolen earlier today." The words hung in the hot air like a spark waiting for dry grass. Angela slowly lowered her coffee cup, her eyes steady behind the sunglasses as she looked at him. For a few seconds neither of them moved. Travelers paused mid-step. The delivery driver leaned against his van. Even the old man by the windshield stopped wiping the glass. Sheriff Brooks had already made up his mind about what he believed was happening. What he didn't know, what no one at that gas station knew, was that the woman standing beside that SUV wasn't just another traveler passing through Oak Ridge County. Angela Carter did not rush to answer because people who lived under constant pressure learned early that silence often revealed more than arguments ever could. She set the coffee cup gently on the flat metal surface beside the pump and looked towards Sheriff Daniel Brooks with the same steady expression she had carried since stepping out of the SUV. The heat rolled across the concrete in slow waves, and somewhere in the distance a semi-truck roared past on Highway 17, but inside the gas station lot the air had gone strangely still. Sheriff Brooks narrowed his eyes as if he expected hesitation, guilt, or panic, yet the woman in front of him showed none of those things. She simply stood there beside the black SUV, calm and composed, like someone who had already measured the situation and decided there was no reason to rush. Brooks shifted his weight slightly and glanced again at the license plate mounted on the back of the vehicle, then back at Angela. "The report came in about 20 minutes ago," he said, his voice firm, confident in the way a man sounds when he believes the story is already finished. Black SUV matching this description. Out-of-state plate. Driver seen leaving a dealership lot earlier this morning. A few people closer to the pumps exchanged quiet looks, the delivery driver folding his arms while pretending not to stare. Angela listened without interrupting. Her posture stayed relaxed, one hand resting lightly near the edge of the fuel pump as the digital numbers continued to climb gallon by gallon. Sheriff Brooks took another step closer, his boots pressing into the gravel with a slow crunch that seemed louder than it should have been. "So here's what we are going to do," he continued. "You're going to step away from the vehicle and explain exactly where you got it." Angela lifted her sunglasses slightly and looked at him directly now, her eyes clear and steady. "Sheriff," she said calmly, "there may be a misunderstanding." Brooks gave a short, dry laugh that did not sound amused. "Funny how it is always a misunderstanding," he replied. "People borrow things that are not theirs, and suddenly everyone has a story." Angela studied him for a moment, not with anger or fear, but with the quiet attention of someone gathering information. Behind Brooks, the old man, near the pickup truck, slowly lowered the paper towel from the windshield and leaned against the hood, watching the conversation unfold. Even the cashier inside the glass window had paused while organizing the shelves, curious about the scene developing outside. Angela spoke again, her voice even and controlled. "If you check the registration information through the federal database, you will see that this vehicle is not reported stolen." The sheriff's expression hardened at the word federal. For a brief moment the corners of his mouth tightened, as if the statement had brushed against something he did not appreciate. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "this county runs its own reports. And right now my report says that SUV should not be here." Angela glanced briefly toward the highway, as though measuring the distance between this quiet roadside stop and the world beyond it. A small sedan pulled into the station and parked near the far pump, its driver immediately noticing the tension and choosing to remain inside the car. Sheriff Brooks folded his arms across his chest, waiting. In his mind the situation was simple. A suspicious vehicle, a driver who did not seem concerned enough, and a sheriff who had handled hundreds of stops like this before. But Angela Carter had not spent 10 years in federal investigations reacting emotionally to moments like this. She simply nodded once, slowly, almost thoughtfully, as if confirming something in her own mind. Then she looked back at Sheriff Brooks and said quietly, "Sheriff, I would strongly suggest verifying that report again." The words were not a threat. They were not even raised above a normal speaking tone. Yet something about the calm certainty in her voice caused a subtle ripple through the small crowd watching from the pumps. Brooks noticed it too, and his eyes narrowed further, the confidence in his posture shifting into something sharper, something more determined to prove a point. What he could not see, what no one in that parking lot could see yet, was that somewhere beyond the bend in Highway 17 another vehicle had just turned off the exit ramp, moving steadily toward the same gas station where a very ordinary afternoon was about to become anything but ordinary. Angela Carter remained standing beside the pump as the numbers on the fuel display slowed and finally stopped, the tank now full, the quiet click of the handle echoing faintly in the still afternoon air. She lifted the nozzle carefully and placed it back into its holder with a calm motion that seemed almost deliberate, as if she refused to let the tension in the parking lot rush her into anything. Sheriff Daniel Brooks watched every movement closely, his posture stiff with the certainty that he was in control of the situation. The sun continued to burn across the wide Texas sky, reflecting off the polished surface of the black SUV while dust drifted lazily across the gravel lot. Brooks tilted his head slightly toward the vehicle. "You still have not answered my question," he said. "Where did you get this SUV?" Angela turned toward the driver's door, but did not open it. Instead, she rested one hand lightly on the roof of the vehicle and faced him again. "It is registered through a federal operations fleet," she replied calmly. "If you run the full VIN through the national system, you will see the record." Brooks exhaled slowly through his nose, clearly unimpressed. "Ma'am, I have been sheriff here for more than a decade," he said. "I know when something does not add up." A pickup truck engine started near the far pump, but then quickly shut off again as the driver realized everyone's attention was fixed on the conversation unfolding beside pump number 3. The small gas station had transformed from a routine roadside stop into something closer to a quiet stage where no one wanted to miss the next line. Angela glanced briefly toward the convenience store window where the cashier stood frozen behind the counter, then back toward the sheriff. "Sheriff Brooks," she said evenly, reading the name stitched across his uniform. "You are making an assumption." The way she spoke his name made him pause for half a second, though he quickly masked it with a firm expression. "And you are standing beside a vehicle reported stolen in my county," he replied. "That is more than an assumption." Angela studied him with a measured look, as if weighing whether the moment required another explanation or simply patience. For years, she had worked investigations that depended on timing, observation, and restraint. The most important skill she had learned was knowing when not to react. The sheriff gestured toward the SUV again. "Step away from the vehicle," he said firmly, "until we sort this out." Angela took a slow breath and stepped back exactly one pace, complying without protest. The movement seemed to reinforce Brooks's confidence, and he nodded once as though the situation was unfolding exactly the way he expected. But Angela's attention had shifted slightly beyond him now, her eyes lifting toward the edge of the highway exit just beyond the line of dusty trees. From that direction came the faint sound of another engine approaching, low and steady. Brooks noticed her glance and turned briefly to follow it, but the road remained mostly empty except for the occasional truck rolling past. He turned back toward her, clearly determined not to lose control of the moment. "You seem very calm for someone being questioned about a stolen vehicle," he said. Angela met his gaze again, her voice still quiet and steady. "Because I know the situation will be clarified soon." The sheriff folded his arms again, studying her more carefully now. There was something about her composure that did not fit the story he believed he was dealing with. Most people grew nervous under direct questioning, especially with a crowd watching. But Angela Carter looked less like someone cornered and more like someone waiting. The delivery driver near the white van leaned slightly forward, trying to hear every word. Even the cicadas seemed to fade into the background as the seconds stretched longer. Then, somewhere beyond the highway curve, a dark government SUV appeared on the exit ramp and began rolling toward the gas station, its windows reflecting the afternoon sun. Angela noticed it immediately, but said nothing. Sheriff Brooks had not seen it yet. And in that quiet moment between assumption and reality, the balance of power in that dusty Texas gas station was about to shift in a way none of the onlookers could have predicted. The dark government SUV rolled slowly off the highway exit and onto the gravel entrance of the gas station, its tires pressing softly against the dust while the afternoon sun reflected across its windshield like a sheet of bright glass. Angela Carter noticed it first, her eyes tracking the vehicle for only a fraction of a second before returning calmly to Sheriff Daniel Brooks, as if nothing had changed. The sheriff, however, was still focused entirely on the situation in front of him. He took another step closer to the black SUV beside pump number 3 and glanced again at the license plate, while the quiet crowd around the pumps continued watching with growing curiosity. The delivery driver leaned against the side of his van with his arms folded. The elderly man by the pickup truck adjusted his hat to block the sun, and even the cashier inside the convenience store had stepped closer to the glass door so he could hear the conversation outside. Brooks cleared his throat and spoke with the steady confidence of a man who believed the outcome was already decided. "I am going to run the vehicle identification number myself," he said firmly. "Until that happens, this vehicle stays right where it is." Angela gave a small nod that showed neither resistance nor agreement. "You are free to verify anything you need," she replied in the same even tone she had used since the beginning of the encounter. The sheriff walked toward the front of the SUV and leaned slightly to read the VIN plate through the windshield. As he did, the second vehicle rolled farther into the station lot behind him. The engine sound was quiet but deliberate, the kind of smooth mechanical hum that comes from a government fleet vehicle maintained with precision. Angela watched it approach from the corner of her eye. Sheriff Brooks, however, was still studying the numbers near the dashboard, carefully repeating them under his breath while pulling out his radio. "Dispatch," he said into the microphone clipped near his shoulder. "I need a full VIN check on a black SUV at Miller Station off Highway 17. The voice from dispatch crackled faintly through the speaker as Brooks read the long sequence of letters and numbers. Angela stood patiently beside the pump, her posture relaxed, her hands resting lightly at her sides. She did not interrupt him. She did not raise her voice. She simply waited. Behind the sheriff, the approaching SUV slowed and came to a quiet stop near the edge of the parking area. Its tinted windows reflected the bright sky and the faded sign above the pumps. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the driver's door opened. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out, followed by two others who moved with the calm coordination of people used to working together. None of them spoke yet. They simply observed the scene in front of them. Sheriff Brooks was still focused on the radio in his hand. "Repeat that," he said into the microphone after hearing the dispatcher's first response. His expression shifted slightly, the confident certainty in his posture beginning to tighten, as if something in the report was not aligning with his expectations. "Are you sure that record is complete?" he asked. Angela glanced toward the new arrivals briefly before returning her attention to the sheriff. The delivery driver near the van noticed the three suited men now standing near the second SUV and straightened his posture, sensing that the situation had quietly changed. The old man by the pickup truck followed his gaze and squinted toward the newcomers. Sheriff Brooks turned halfway around as he waited for dispatch to repeat the information through his radio. That was when he finally noticed the three men standing several yards behind him. For a moment, he simply stared at them, unsure why they were there. The tallest of the three stepped forward calmly and reached inside his jacket. Angela Carter watched the moment unfold without surprise. The man removed a small leather wallet and opened it just enough for the badge inside to catch the sunlight. The metal emblem flashed briefly in the bright Texas afternoon as he spoke in a clear professional voice. "Sheriff Brooks," he said, "we need to talk about the vehicle you are inspecting." For a brief moment, Sheriff Daniel Brooks did not respond because the appearance of the badge had interrupted the certainty that had guided every decision he had made during the last several minutes. The sunlight caught the metal emblem again as the tall man held it steady, allowing Brooks enough time to read the letters engraved across its surface. Federal Bureau of Investigation. The words seemed to settle into the air around the gas station like a sudden shift in weather. Brooks straightened slowly, lowering the radio from his shoulder while his eyes moved from the badge to the three men standing beside the second SUV. None of them looked hurried. None of them looked uncertain. They simply stood there with the quiet composure of people accustomed to walking into tense situations and letting the facts speak for themselves. The tall agent stepped forward another pace. "My name is Special Agent Mark Ellis," he said calmly. "We are looking for a federal operations vehicle that is currently part of an active investigation." His gaze shifted briefly toward the black SUV parked beside pump number 3 before returning to the sheriff. Around them, the small group of bystanders remained perfectly still, sensing that something important had just changed even if they did not yet understand how. Sheriff Brooks cleared his throat and tried to regain the confident tone he had used earlier. "This vehicle was reported stolen earlier today," he said firmly, gesturing toward the SUV beside Angela Carter. "I am verifying the identification number right now." Agent Ellis listened without interruption, then nodded slightly, as if acknowledging the statement. "That report has already been reviewed," he replied. "The vehicle is registered through a federal task unit." Brooks hesitated for the first time since arriving at the gas station. His eyes moved again to the SUV, then toward Angela Carter, standing quietly beside the pump. She had not moved since the agents arrived. Her expression remained calm, almost patient, as though the entire sequence of events had unfolded exactly as she expected. Brooks shifted his stance, suddenly aware that the attention of everyone in the lot had turned toward him. The delivery driver near the van leaned forward slightly, while the elderly man by the pickup truck watched with raised eyebrows. Even the cashier had stepped outside the store now, holding the door open with one hand as he tried to follow the conversation. Agent Ellis spoke again, his voice measured and professional. "Sheriff Brooks, that SUV is part of a controlled operation involving multiple jurisdictions." Brooks frowned. "Then why was it reported stolen in my system?" he asked. Ellis glanced briefly at one of the other agents before answering. "Because sometimes information is entered in ways that allow certain suspects to reveal themselves." The explanation hung in the air for a moment. Brooks seemed to process the words slowly. "And the driver?" he asked. Ellis turned his head slightly toward Angela Carter. The afternoon sun reflected faintly off the surface of the vehicle beside her as she lifted her sunglasses and looked directly at the sheriff. Agent Ellis allowed a small pause before speaking again. "The driver," he said, "is the lead investigator assigned to that operation." Sheriff Brooks followed the direction of his gaze until his eyes met Angela Carter's for the first time without the shield of his earlier assumptions. For several seconds neither of them spoke. The cicadas resumed their steady hum somewhere beyond the pumps while a truck passed along the highway in the distance. Angela Carter finally stepped forward one pace, her voice calm, but unmistakably clear. "Special Agent Angela Carter," she said. "Federal Bureau of Investigation." The simple introduction landed with more weight than any raised voice could have carried. Sheriff Brooks felt the quiet attention of every person in the gas station settle on him at once. And in that dusty roadside parking lot beneath the wide Texas sky, the situation he believed he controlled had just revealed an entirely different reality. For several seconds, Sheriff Daniel Brooks said nothing at all. The words Special Agent Angela Carter seemed to echo quietly across the dusty gas station lot, while the late afternoon sun hung motionless above Highway 17. Brooks stood beside the black SUV with the radio still resting in his hand, the confidence he carried only moments earlier now replaced by a cautious silence. The small crowd around the pumps shifted slightly as people exchanged glances, sensing the shift in the situation even if none of them fully understood the details of the investigation unfolding in front of them. Angela Carter lowered her sunglasses back onto the bridge of her nose and watched the sheriff with the calm patience of someone who had seen this moment happen many times before in different places across the country. It was the moment when assumptions slowly began to dissolve in the presence of facts. Special Agent Mark Ellis stepped forward again, his voice steady and professional. "Sheriff Brooks, the vehicle you reported was flagged intentionally as part of an interstate operation," he explained. "The alert in your system was designed to help track a network that has been moving stolen vehicles across several states." Brooks looked from Ellis to Angela and then back toward the SUV beside pump number 3, as if seeing it for the first time without the filter of suspicion. The black paint reflected the bright Texas sky, while the warm air carried the faint scent of gasoline and asphalt. "You were saying the report was part of the investigation," Brooks said slowly. Ellis nodded once. "Exactly." The sheriff shifted his stance and removed his hat for a moment, running a hand across his forehead before placing it back again. His voice sounded more measured now, the earlier certainty replaced with a cautious tone. "If that is the case, someone should have notified the county office." Ellis answered calmly. "Certain operations remain limited to federal channels until specific checkpoints occur." Angela Carter stepped forward slightly then, her posture relaxed but unmistakably confident. "And this location happened to be one of those checkpoints," she said. Brooks looked at her again, this time with a very different expression than before. The woman he had questioned only minutes earlier now stood beside the SUV not as a suspect, but as the person responsible for the investigation surrounding it. The delivery driver near the van quietly shook his head in disbelief, while the elderly man by the pickup truck adjusted his glasses as though trying to see the scene more clearly. Brooks cleared his throat again. "So the vehicle was never stolen," he said. Angela replied calmly. "No, Sheriff. It was used to track individuals who believed it was." Ellis continued the explanation. "Earlier today, several suspects were observed attempting to access vehicles flagged through dealership systems. When one of them attempted to tag this SUV in the database, the alert triggered across multiple jurisdictions." Brooks nodded slowly as the pieces began to align in his mind. The radio in his hand crackled again with a faint voice from dispatch asking for confirmation, but Brooks did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked again toward Angela Carter, the afternoon sunlight catching the edge of the SUV behind her. The quiet confidence in her stance made it clear that the situation had never been out of her control. The sheriff finally lifted the radio and spoke into it with a steady voice. "Dispatch, cancel the stolen vehicle alert connected to the black SUV at Miller Station. Federal investigation confirmed." The reply came back, quickly acknowledging the update. When Brooks lowered the radio again, he glanced toward Angela with a restrained nod. "Looks like I stepped into the middle of something bigger than I realized," he admitted. Angela met his gaze calmly. "Investigations often look confusing from the outside," she said. The breeze moved lightly across the lot as another truck passed along the highway, and the small gathering of bystanders began to relax now that the tension had eased. Yet beneath the quiet surface of the moment, one thing had become clear to everyone present. The woman standing beside the SUV had never been a suspect at all. She had been the one guiding the entire situation from the very beginning. The tension that had filled the small gas station minutes earlier slowly began to dissolve, but the quiet weight of the moment remained. Sheriff Daniel Brooks stood beside the black SUV with a posture that had changed noticeably since the arrival of the federal agents. The same man who had walked across the gravel with unquestioned authority now appeared more careful with every word and movement. Around them, the dusty lot had returned to its usual sounds, the distant hum of traffic along Highway 17, the buzz of cicadas in the dry Texas air, and the soft clicking of cooling engines from vehicles parked beside the pumps. Yet no one had truly lost interest in what had just happened. The delivery driver leaned against his van with quiet curiosity, while the elderly man by the pickup truck watched with thoughtful eyes, as if replaying the entire encounter in his mind. Special Agent Mark Ellis glanced toward Angela Carter and gave a small nod, the kind shared between colleagues who understood exactly how close a situation had come to unfolding differently. Angela stepped toward the driver's side of the SUV and rested her hand lightly on the door handle while she looked once more at Sheriff Brooks. Her voice remained calm and professional, but there was a quiet firmness beneath it now. "Sheriff, situations like this are exactly why coordination between agencies matters," she said. Brooks nodded slowly, the earlier certainty in his posture replaced by a more reflective expression. "I can see that now," he replied. "The report in our system looked real enough." Angela gave a slight smile that held neither sarcasm nor judgment. "That was the point," she explained. "The network we are tracking has been monitoring dealership alerts across several counties. When the false report was triggered this morning, we expected someone involved in the operation to react." Ellis continued the explanation while gesturing briefly toward the SUV. "The individuals we are tracking believe this vehicle had been tagged for resale after a theft attempt earlier today. We allowed the alert to circulate through several systems to see who might respond." Brooks folded his arms thoughtfully, the new information settling in piece by piece. "And you came here because you expected someone connected to that network to show up?" Angela nodded. "Exactly." The sheriff looked around the quiet gas station lot again, as if searching for signs of the hidden operation that had been unfolding beneath what appeared to be a routine roadside stop. For the bystanders, it had looked like a simple misunderstanding. For Angela Carter and the agents standing nearby, it had been one step in a much larger investigation that stretched far beyond Oak Ridge County. Ellis glanced briefly toward the highway entrance before speaking again. "Our surveillance team is monitoring activity along the route," he said. "If the people behind the network believe the SUV was being held here, they may attempt to approach." Brooks raised an eyebrow at that. "You are expecting them to come here?" Angela answered calmly. "It is a possibility." The delivery driver, who had been quietly pretending not to listen, straightened slightly at that remark while the elderly man by the pickup truck adjusted his hat again. The afternoon sun had begun its slow descent toward the horizon, casting longer shadows across the gravel lot. Angela opened the SUV door halfway, but did not get inside. Instead, she turned once more toward Sheriff Brooks. "Sheriff, I appreciate you confirming the alert with dispatch," she said. Brooks gave a small nod. "Just doing my job." Angela looked at him steadily for a moment before responding. "So am I." The words were simple, but the meaning behind them carried the quiet authority of someone who had spent years navigating situations where assumptions could change everything. Ellis checked his watch briefly before glancing toward the highway again. The agents remained alert, even though their posture appeared relaxed. For the people watching from the pumps, the moment might have seemed calm now, but beneath that calm the investigation was still moving forward. Angela Carter stepped back from the SUV and looked toward the road, where vehicles continued passing along the wide Texas highway. Somewhere out there, the individuals who had triggered the false alert earlier that day were still moving through the same network of roads and small towns. And if the operation unfolded the way she expected, this quiet gas station in Oak Ridge County might soon become the place where their plan finally unraveled. The afternoon sunlight stretched longer across the gravel lot as time moved quietly forward, and the atmosphere around the gas station had shifted from tension to something more watchful, more deliberate. Angela Carter stood beside the black SUV with the steady focus of someone who understood that the calmest moments of an investigation were often the ones that mattered most. Special Agent Mark Ellis remained a few steps behind her, speaking quietly into a small communication device, while the other two agents positioned themselves casually near the second government vehicle. Their posture appeared relaxed to anyone passing by, but every glance toward the highway entrance carried the silent awareness that they were waiting for something to happen. Sheriff Daniel Brooks watched the agents for a moment before looking back toward Angela. The earlier confrontation had faded, replaced by the uncomfortable realization that he had stepped into a situation far larger than he first believed. He rested his hands on his belt and spoke in a calmer voice than before. "You think someone is actually going to show up here?" Angela looked toward the distant road where the asphalt shimmered in the heat. "If the people monitoring that alert believe the vehicle is still here," she said, "they will want to confirm it." Brooks glanced again toward the highway entrance, now seeing the quiet roadside stop in a completely different way than he had earlier. What had seemed like a routine call had turned into a possible meeting point in a federal investigation that crossed state lines. The delivery driver near the van had returned to his seat, but left the door open, pretending to organize paperwork while continuing to watch the scene unfold. The elderly man by the pickup truck remained near the hood of his vehicle, curiosity holding him there longer than he had planned. Inside the convenience store, the cashier had resumed his work, but kept glancing through the window toward the parking lot. Angela shifted her attention briefly toward the SUV and checked something inside through the open door before closing it again. The vehicle sat quietly beside pump number 3, its dark surface reflecting the sky, as if it were nothing more than another traveler's car stopping for fuel. Yet to the people involved in the investigation, it represented weeks of planning and coordination. Special Agent Ellis finished speaking into the communicator and stepped closer to Angela. "Surveillance team confirmed movement on the access road 2 miles north," he said quietly. Angela nodded once, her expression focused but calm. "Vehicle description?" she asked. "Gray sedan," Ellis replied. "Registered under a name that has already appeared in the dealership system alerts." Angela looked again toward the highway entrance. The breeze carried the faint sound of tires from passing traffic, and somewhere in the distance a vehicle changed lanes as it approached the exit ramp. Sheriff Brooks watched her carefully, beginning to understand that the situation unfolding at the gas station had been anticipated long before he arrived. "So this whole stop," he said slowly, "might actually bring them straight to you." Angela gave a slight nod. "That is the idea." The sheriff folded his arms again, but this time not with suspicion, rather with a growing respect for the strategy behind the operation. For years he had handled cases within his county limits, situations that started and ended within a few miles of the same courthouse. What he was witnessing now was something different entirely, an investigation designed to guide events rather than simply react to them. Angela Carter stood quietly beside the SUV as the shadows of the pumps stretched across the ground. Her eyes remained fixed on the road beyond the gas station sign, where vehicles occasionally passed along the wide Texas highway. The agents around her waited without impatience, knowing that investigations like this often came down to a single moment when the right person arrived in the right place. And as the distant shape of a gray sedan finally appeared near the highway exit, slowing as it approached the gas station entrance, Angela Carter understood that the quiet roadside stop in Oak Ridge County was about to reveal exactly who had been watching that stolen vehicle alert all along. The gray sedan slowed as it turned off Highway 17 and rolled toward the entrance of the small gas station, its engine humming softly as it crossed the gravel and pulled into the lot. The late afternoon sun reflected across its windshield, briefly hiding the faces inside while the vehicle circled slowly past the pumps. Angela Carter did not move, but her attention sharpened the moment the sedan appeared. She had been expecting this moment ever since the false alert had been triggered earlier that day. Beside her, Special Agent Mark Ellis glanced toward the approaching car and then gave a nearly invisible nod to the other agents positioned around the lot. To anyone watching, the scene still looked like a quiet roadside stop, travelers refueling and preparing to leave. Yet every detail had suddenly become important. The gray sedan rolled past the convenience store window, and then slowed near pump number 2. Inside the vehicle, a man looked toward the black SUV parked beside Angela Carter. His eyes lingered on it for several seconds before he turned his head slightly toward the passenger seat, as if confirming something with someone beside him. Sheriff Daniel Brooks noticed the shift in the agents immediately. The calm patience he had observed earlier was gone, replaced by a focused awareness that reminded him this was no longer just a conversation in a parking lot. The driver of the gray sedan finally stepped out, glancing once toward the highway before walking slowly around his car. He appeared relaxed, but his attention kept returning to the black SUV beside pump number 3. Angela watched him approach with steady composure, her expression giving away nothing about the investigation unfolding beneath the quiet surface of the moment. The man stopped a few yards away and looked toward the SUV again. "That your vehicle?" he asked casually, nodding toward the black SUV. Angela replied in the same calm tone she had used throughout the afternoon. "Yes." The man studied the vehicle again, clearly recognizing something about it that matched the alert he had seen earlier that day. His curiosity had brought him exactly where the investigation needed him to be. Special Agent Ellis stepped forward then, his badge visible as he spoke in a professional voice that carried across the lot. "Sir, we would like to ask you a few questions regarding vehicle registration alerts reported earlier today." The man froze for a moment, clearly surprised by the sudden presence of federal agents. His eyes moved quickly between Angela Carter, Sheriff Brooks, and the agents standing nearby. In that brief pause, the quiet strategy behind the operation revealed itself completely. The alert placed into the system had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had drawn someone connected to the vehicle theft network directly into the open. Sheriff Brooks watched the exchange with growing realization. What had begun as a routine stop had quietly become the turning point in a larger investigation. The agents spoke calmly with the man near the gray sedan, guiding the conversation with professional precision, while another agent noted the vehicle information. No raised voices, no sudden movements, only careful questions and patient observation as the situation unfolded exactly as planned. Angela Carter remained beside the black SUV, her posture relaxed as she watched the investigation move forward. The warm Texas wind moved lightly through the station lot, while traffic continued passing along the highway, as if nothing unusual were happening at all. Sheriff Brooks stepped closer to her and lowered his voice slightly. "Looks like your plan worked," he said. Angela looked toward the road for a moment before answering. "Sometimes the truth reveals itself when people believe no one is watching." Brooks nodded thoughtfully, understanding the lesson behind the moment. In law enforcement, it was easy to rely on assumptions, easy to believe that authority alone revealed the whole story. But that afternoon in a quiet gas station outside Oak Ridge County had shown him something different. The calmest voice in the room had been the one carrying the most authority all along. As the agents continued their work near the gray sedan and the investigation moved one step closer to exposing the larger network behind it, the dusty roadside stop slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm. Engines started, travelers finished fueling, and the fading sunlight stretched across the gravel lot. Yet for those who had witnessed the encounter, the memory